Picture a Viking. Right now, in your head, there's probably a helmet with two curved horns sticking out of it. We've all seen it. Movies, cartoons, sports logos, Halloween costumes, even the label on a stick of butter. It's one of the most recognizable images in history. Ask a 5-year-old to draw a Viking and there's a very good chance those horns show up before the beard does. It's also completely made up. In over 1,000 years of Viking Age archaeology, thousands of graves excavated, weapons catalogued, and helmets recovered across Scandinavia, we have found exactly one intact Viking Age helmet. One. And it has no horns. Not a partial horn. Not a broken stub where a horn might have snapped off. Nothing. If horned helmets were ever a real piece of Viking military equipment, we would expect to find at least some trace of them somewhere in over 1,000 years of graves. We haven't. Not one. So if it never happened, where did this image come from? And more importantly, why do we still believe it? This hard, this consistently, all these centuries later. Let's start with what Vikings actually wore, because the real answer is honestly more interesting than the myth. The single confirmed helmet found at a farm called Gjermundbu in Norway in 1943 is a simple rounded iron cap with a guard over the eyes and nose, sometimes called a spectacle guard because of its shape. It's practical, unremarkable, built for one job, protecting a skull in close combat. That's it. Think about what a horned helmet would actually mean in a real fight. Two curved horns sticking out from your head give an opponent something to grab, to twist, to yank you off balance with. In hand-to-hand combat, that's not intimidating. That's a built-in weakness. A smart warrior wants nothing on their body that an enemy can use as a handle. So beyond the total lack of physical evidence, the design itself doesn't even make tactical sense for actual warfare. It's a costume idea, not a battlefield idea. Historians have also gone looking for horned helmets in the surviving Viking Age art itself. Carvings, tapestries, small metal figurines depicting warriors and gods. None of it shows horned battle helmets. Not the Oseberg tapestry fragments, not the picture stones from Gotland, none of it. If horned helmets had been part of Viking military culture, we'd expect them to show up somewhere in Viking-made art from the Viking Age. They simply don't. Now here's where it gets slightly more nuanced, because there is a kernel of truth buried in this myth, just from the wrong time period entirely. Some ceremonial or religious headgear from earlier Iron Age Scandinavia, centuries before the Viking Age even began, did include horn-like decorations. Archaeologists have found bronze horned helmets from around 900 BCE, likely used in religious rituals rather than combat. But that's roughly 1,700 years before the Viking Age starts. It's a completely different culture, a completely different purpose, separated from the Viking era by more time than separates us from ancient Rome. Somewhere along the way, popular imagination took an object from the wrong era, stripped away all its context, and merged it into the wrong image entirely. So the myth isn't ancient at all. It's actually quite recent, and we can trace it back to one specific person, at one specific moment, doing one specific job. The person most responsible has a name, Carl Emil Doppler, a German costume designer working in 1876. He was designing costumes for the premiere of Richard Wagner's opera cycle, Der Ring des Nibelungen, a sprawling, dramatic reimagining of Norse and Germanic legends staged at the newly built Bayreuth Festival Theater. Wagner wanted spectacle. He wanted gods and warriors that felt larger than life under stage lighting, visible from the back row. Doppler's job was to deliver that. So he added horns. And wings on some of the helmets too. Dramatic, sweeping silhouettes designed to read clearly from a distance, under gaslight, on a stage built for myth and grandeur, not for historical accuracy. Nobody involved in that production was claiming this was what real Vikings wore. It was theater. It was costume design solving a lighting and staging problem, the same way a modern film might exaggerate a character's silhouette for visual impact. But the opera was a massive cultural event across Europe, and the imagery didn't stay on the stage. Illustrators who saw the production or saw drawings and reviews of it began incorporating the look into their own Norse-themed artwork. Children's storybooks picked it up next because a horned silhouette was an easy visual shorthand for ancient warrior that young readers could instantly recognize. By the early 20th century, horned helmets were showing up in illustrations with absolutely no connection to Wagner, no connection to opera, no connection to the original source at all. It had already detached from its origin and become simply what Vikings look like in the popular imagination. An image being copied from other images, generation after generation, with nobody checking back against the archaeology. From there, the myth spread through every channel popular culture had available. Comic books in the mid-20th century used it constantly because it was visually instant. Readers could identify a Viking character on the page in a fraction of a second, without needing any additional context. Sports teams and mascots adopted it for the exact same reason. Instant recognizability wins in branding, every single time, over historical accuracy. Halloween costume manufacturers mass-produced plastic horned helmets by the millions because they were cheap to mold, instantly recognizable, and nobody buying one at the store was pausing to fact-check it against Norwegian archaeology. Cartoons aimed at children reinforced it further, decade after decade. By the time most of us were old enough to form our own mental image of history, the horned helmet was already locked in. Not because it was ever true, but because it had been repeated by nearly everyone, long before we ever had a chance to question it. This is where the story stops being about helmets and starts being about us. We tend to assume that if an image feels familiar enough, it must be accurate. Repetition ends up doing the work that evidence should be doing. Nobody alive today learned about horned helmets from an actual Viking, or from a Viking Age artifact, or from a peer-reviewed excavation report. We learned it from an opera costume, filtered through 150 years of illustrators, filmmakers, toy manufacturers, and sports marketing teams, all of them copying each other instead of checking the archaeological record even once along the way. And this pattern isn't unique to Vikings at all. Historians run into it constantly across almost every era of popular history. An image or a story gets created for drama or convenience, or simply to solve a practical problem like stage lighting. It gets repeated enough times, by enough people, across enough generations. And eventually the sheer repetition itself starts to feel like evidence, even though nothing was ever actually proven. We stop asking where an idea originally came from once we've seen it often enough to feel certain about it. So the next time you picture a Viking, you'll probably still see the horns. Honestly, that's fine. The image isn't going anywhere, and it's not really doing anyone harm. But now at least you'll know exactly what you're actually picturing. You're not picturing a Norse warrior, you're picturing a 19th century opera costume designed to look good under gaslight for one theater production in Bayreuth in 1876. That somehow, against all odds, got very, very good at being remembered. Sources referenced in this video are noted in the description.